Choose, care for my parents or divorce. I'll let you decide. He said this proudly, standing in front of our brand new home, as if he had bought this grand house for me. But the truth is, it was me who purchased the land and the house. My husband, always thinking so highly of himself, truly believes he's entitled to tell me to care for his parents and move into this house if I want to avoid divorce. He thinks he's worth that much. It's hard to believe, but he truly believes it. The fact that no one stands by his side anymore is all the evidence I need. But he still can't see it. What do you mean, care for your parents? We don't even live with them. What are you talking about? He hasn't realized yet that even his parents, who were his last support, are pulling away from him. My name is Sarah and I'm 45, working as a manager at a consulting firm. I don't have any children. I joined my current company 6 years ago after a career change. After graduating from college, I worked as a civil servant in my hometown for about 2 years. But the conservative environment, resistant to anything new, and the lack of motivation at the workplace made me decide to leave. After gaining experience in a foreign-affiliated company, I switched jobs again and ended up at my current company thanks to a recommendation from a friend. The ability to work remotely has made it easier to balance work and home life, and I no longer have to endure long commutes. In contrast to my time as a civil servant, my current company is the complete opposite. We're encouraged to take on as much work as we can handle, and as we move up the ranks, we gain the autonomy to choose our project teams. There's no endless string of pointless meetings or promotions based solely on seniority. Of course, there's pressure to deliver results, and employee evaluations are tied directly to numbers, but that pressure leads directly to pay raises if you perform well. I wanted a workplace where I could expect to be compensated according to my abilities and efforts, and I found that here. In the 6 years since I joined, I've been promoted and now lead a team of top talent hired through mid-career recruitment, continuing to achieve excellent results. As a result, I earn significantly more than my husband, but I've never shared my exact income with him. I met my husband Derek through a connection on social media. We were both from the same hometown, and we started dating after meeting at an offline gathering. Looking back, I realized Derek made a great first impression, but his true nature became apparent over time. When we exchanged contact information, some people who knew him warned me to be careful, and now I understand why. At first, though, I thought Derek was a kind person who listened to me. Derek works at the local city office and is 1 year younger than me. He's very rooted in the community, having attended the local national university and never leaving the state except for trips. As our relationship progressed, I realized he has deep-seated insecurities about living in a more urban environment. Having worked in the city myself, I could understand the appeal of the speed, the trends, and the feeling of being at the forefront. The sheer number of people and businesses was overwhelming at first, and the variety of choices was astonishing. But that doesn't mean that the city is inherently superior. In fact, the more tired I became, the more I longed to return to my hometown. That's why when I started working remotely, I gave up my apartment in the city and moved back home. Living in the city indefinitely can be exhausting, and I realized that both places have their pros and cons. I love both, but outside of work, I prefer to spend my time quietly in my hometown. However, my husband often made snide remarks about my career decisions. His pride is just a mask for his insecurities. In our hometown, Derek was always considered exceptional, having attended the best local schools, the top local university, and landing a solid job at the city office. His parents were likely proud, as his 2 younger sisters had moved far away to raise their own families. Derek's parents probably thought they could rely on him to care for them in their old age and eventually inherit the family home. I can imagine they spoiled him growing up so he wouldn't leave like his sisters did. But marriage involves another person. It's not like school, where grades determine success. Despite his efforts to be kind to potential romantic partners, once they got to know him, they'd leave, and he repeated this cycle several times before we met. I was out of town during that period, so I missed the rumors about him. But after we got married, I started noticing condescending comments from him. The city office work seemed slow-paced, and Derek spent his time gossiping about others. He would often vent to me about the local residents who came to the counter, as well as his colleagues and supervisors. While it's natural to have grievances, I couldn't help but think that he had so much time to complain because his job was uneventful. I have my share of difficult people to deal with, but I don't have the time to engage with every little annoyance. Complaining doesn't bring in any money, and I believe that the less time spent on grievances, the better. What was most alarming was that Derek would boast to his parents during our visits, endlessly telling them how incompetent people around him was in comparison to himself. His father would often sigh, likely fed up, while his mother would nervously nod along, trying to keep Derek from losing his temper. Since their daughters had left town and didn't visit with their children, his parents were probably desperate to avoid pushing us away. When we first got married, I was working at a foreign-affiliated company commuting 2 hours each way from my hometown. I hated my previous unfulfilling job so much that I decided to switch to a more challenging role, even if it meant a long commute. It was hard on me, but since my transportation was fully covered and my salary increased, it shouldn't have been an issue for Derek. Yet I recall him criticizing me often. It was his hometown inferiority complex.
Why go to all that trouble just to work in the city? You're just proving how much of a country bumpkin you are.
Whether in the city or the country didn't matter. I was just looking for a fulfilling job. Job opportunities in the countryside were limited, so I had no choice but to go to the city. But Derek didn't understand. Even though I never neglected my household responsibilities, I made sure to keep up with everything, even if it meant sacrificing sleep. I didn't want to give him any reason to complain. It was my small act of rebellion. Then something happened that pushed Derek's behavior into even more irrational territory. He attended a high school reunion. I didn't go because we attended different schools, but my childhood friend Ashley, who went to the same high school as Derek, told me what happened. According to her, everyone was tired of his boasting, and no one was interested in his stories. While his parents and relatives might have been impressed with his resume, his former classmates were not. Many of them had attended prestigious universities or worked at major companies in LA, and some had even started their own businesses. In that group, Derek's resume was painfully ordinary, and no one was particularly impressed. He didn't like that one bit. When no one paid attention to his career, he started bragging about how his wife made a lot of money. And then he said this.
My wife hasn't given me a child yet, and my parents aren't too happy about that. But compared to a housewife who doesn't make any money, she's in a whole different league.
Ashley must have been furious because she emphasized that Derek really said that. Not only was his comment insulting to women, but his evaluation of me was like I was just another tool. It made me shudder to think that if I had quit my job to raise children, he would have considered me just another housewife too. Derek wasn't at the reunion to reconnect with old friends. He just wanted to show off. He craved their envy and wanted to make them feel inferior, feeding his own fragile ego. But when he couldn't brag successfully, he started using me and putting others down to elevate himself. No wonder he stopped getting invited to reunions after middle school, high school, and college. He wasn't really proud of me. He just wanted to boast that a woman like me had fallen for him. One day after a classmate got fed up with his bragging, they said this.
Isn't it embarrassing that your wife makes more money than you?
I don't think they were trying to say that women shouldn't earn money. I think they were just trying to poke fun at how much Derek bragged. The status Derek thought he had for marrying a successful woman backfired, and he was humiliated. From that day on, his competitive and condescending remarks toward me became even more frequent. His comment about my long commute was likely a result of this growing bitterness. Around that time, his parents started nagging me about when we were going to have children, which Derek joined in on. They seemed to agree on one thing, looking down on me as a wife who was more interested in a career than having kids. The truth is, Derek probably didn't even want kids all that much. He just wanted someone to praise him. There's no way he could prioritize a child's needs over his own. Derek once tried to change jobs, something his parents didn't know about, but I was aware. He thought it would be easy because he had no blemish on his academic record. He was naive enough to believe that all he had to do was choose where he wanted to work. I remember how ridiculous his assumptions were, as if he thought just sending in his resume would land him an interview. The truth was, no company even contacted him for a screening interview. It was obvious. His resume showed he had never left his hometown, and his experience and qualifications were severely lacking. His degree might have impressed people 20 years ago, but times had changed. I know firsthand that switching from a government job to a private company is difficult. Many mid-career hires from the public sector struggle in private companies because their skills don't translate. Private companies seek employees who can immediately contribute to the bottom line, so accomplishments and skills are essential. Derek, however, was confident his resume would get him hired, so he was furious when he heard nothing back. If Derek had used that moment to reflect on his narrow perspective and reevaluate his life, things might have turned out differently. But I doubted it. Instead, he turned his focus to trying to one-up me, especially after I successfully moved to a consulting firm following my stint in a foreign company.
It's easy for women, isn't it? Companies probably have quotas for hiring women, even if they're not all that talented.
He began spouting the same nonsense you might see in online conspiracy theories. In reality, I had been quietly improving my language skills and studying for my tax advisor certification, but I didn't feel the need to brag about it. I would have much preferred it if Derek had appreciated my contributions and relied on me as his partner, but unfortunately that never happened. Recently, during the Thanksgiving holiday, Derek's usually reticent father, Brian, finally started complaining about his son.
We spoiled him too much because he was our only son. We never thought he would become this difficult. Once Derek became a teenager, we couldn't control him physically, and he knew it. When he didn't get his way, he would shout and lash out. We had no choice but to give in to his demands. We just wanted him to get married and move out.
I didn't know the details of what had happened between them, but I figured the news of Derek's fall from grace had spread around town. His classmates' parents worked in the local shops and businesses, so it's likely that rumors had reached his parents' ears too. It's no wonder his sisters had distanced themselves from the family. Even his parents, who used to pester me about grandchildren, had begun to shift their focus, asking me not to leave their son. They were trying to push the burden of handling their son onto me. At first, they boasted about him, but now they were begging me to stay with them. As I started working more remotely, Derek became fixated on criticizing my job.
You can't really be working from home all day. Women like you get to have such easy jobs. All you do is play with a computer.
I would still visit important clients in person, and I traveled when necessary, but most meetings were done online. My team managed projects with revenues ranging from hundreds of thousands to millions, and my salary and bonuses have been steadily increasing. I didn't want to provoke Derek's fragile ego, so I stayed quiet about how much more I earned than him. Unlike Derek, I didn't have time to gossip about others. When things went wrong, the responsibility fell on me. People have different preferences, but Derek's obsession with comparing everything in terms of better or worse must have made life difficult for him.
You tried working in the city, but ended up back here doing some remote job. Looks like you failed, huh?
Listen, I didn't fail. My company offers remote work options now because they're adapting to what people want. I knew it was pointless, but I couldn't help myself from responding.
It's no different from a stay-at-home mom making some pocket money. You're probably just doing something like applying or contests.
Derek, just because I've stayed quiet doesn't mean you can say whatever you want. Have you forgotten who paid for the car last year's overseas vacation, or even this new house we're moving into? He quickly tried to deflect, as he always did.
Oh, I was just talking about the typical housewife. You've got your parents' money, don't you?
He actually believed that I was getting money from my parents. I hadn't told him about my income, so it was somewhat understandable. But the way he degraded others to feel better about himself seemed like some kind of illness to me. How can you treat me this way when I'm the one who's paid for almost everything, including this new house?
Hey, I'm not saying anything bad about you, Sarah. You're being paranoid.
If I had been sick or raising a child, I might have become a stay-at-home wife, and he would have treated me this way anyway. Now that Derek is in his 40s, I don't think it's possible for him to fix his warped perspective. Our apartment was getting old, and we had started planning to buy a house. We'd waited a long time thinking that I might get pregnant, but after turning 40, we figured it was time to go ahead with the plan. Derek had always wanted a house of his own. If he were paying for it himself, I'd say he had a right to express his preferences, but he could barely afford the moving costs. His dream house was in a prime location near the station, with convenient shopping in a quiet residential area close to the hospital, essentially a luxury property. The combined cost of the land and the house was over $1 million, and my husband, who earned about $50,000 a year, was aiming way too high. And yet he expected me, whom he ridiculed as earning pocket money, to buy it, without a word of gratitude. It was absurd. Even if he got down on his knees, it wouldn't be enough. If we moved in, I was sure he would start boasting to others about his luxurious house, despite contributing nothing. One night, I got a call from Ashley. You won't believe this, but Derek crashed our class reunion. What? How? No one even told him about it. We didn't tell him the time or place. I don't know how he found out, but he did. He just showed up uninvited. Oh, I have no idea how he found out, but I do know that he's been quietly removed from every reunion group. Does Derek even have any friends? None. Sorry, Sarah, but everyone really dislikes him. You didn't know about today's reunion, right? No, I didn't, but I didn't think you'd tell him anyway. I didn't. I have no idea how he found out. Everyone's freaked out. We're thinking of canceling reunions altogether just to avoid him. Remember how last year he pissed off everyone so much that we decided not to invite him anymore? Yeah, that's right. We didn't even use the word reunion when we booked the venue this time. We were extra careful. Exactly. Some of the local businesses talk, and it wouldn't be hard for him to catch wind of a reunion. I still don't get how he found out, though. I know, it's creepy. Everyone's on edge. It's not just that, though. I didn't want to worry you, but Derek has been harassing one of our classmates. There's a woman, Rachel, who became a single mother after a divorce. Derek's been fixated on her. What? Tell me everything. Rachel told everyone at a reunion a few years ago that she'd gotten divorced. Derek jumped at the chance to humiliate her, repeatedly making degrading comments about how hard it must be to raise a kid on her own.
How can you make enough money as a single mom? Are you doing something shady? You're in your 30s now. Only specialized adult services hire women your age. What kind of future will your kid have with that kind of money?
Derek's classmates scolded him fiercely. Rachel wasn't doing any shady work. She was just working 2 part-time jobs at the supermarket and deli to make ends meet. Ah, that's horrible. I can't believe he said that. He wasn't like this before we got married. If that was all, we could just cut ties with him, but it didn't end there. What do you mean? He started stalking Rachel. Stalking her? Yeah, he looked up her family's address on the class reunion list and started showing up at her house, asking questions about her life. And this was all after he married you, Sarah. Are you serious? Yeah, it's such a disgusting story that I didn't want to tell you, but I couldn't keep it from you any longer. He followed her even after she moved twice from her kids' school. Derek would just run into her near her new house and start talking to her. People think he's using his position at the city office to access her private information. If that's true, Derek is much worse than I imagined. If these rumors are correct, Derek could even face criminal charges. I might end up having to support him financially if things continue down this path, and I wasn't about to let that happen. Although I didn't love him, I hadn't seen any reason to leave him until now. But if he's involved in something like infidelity or a crime, that changes things. I hired a private investigator specializing in infidelity and stalking cases as soon as I hung up with Ashley. If the rumors were true about Derek using his position to access personal information, we would need concrete evidence. I figured $20,000 should cover the costs, but I was willing to spend more if needed. For too long, I'd put up with his insults, focusing on my fulfilling career and ignoring his childish comments. But I should have stopped him sooner. After all, we were still a family, and I needed to take responsibility for my part in all of this. Around midnight, Derek stumbled home reeking of alcohol. His eyes were glazed over, and he looked terrible. He must have been lectured by his classmates, taken to another bar, and scolded all night. As soon as he stepped into the house, he threw his leather shoes at the wall with a loud crash.
Damn it, you're all pathetic.
It was the middle of the night, and the neighborhood dogs started barking in response to the commotion. Please, keep your voice down. It's the middle of the night, and you'll disturb the neighbors.
Shut up, don't tell me what to do, you bottom dweller.
You can't just use words like bottom dweller like it's nothing. How would you feel if someone called you that? It's degrading. He was too drunk to listen to reason.
What's wrong with calling them bottom dwellers when they are? Those jerks grabbed my arm. Those idiots. No wonder all they've got is brute strength.
Maybe they grabbed your arm because you crashed their reunion uninvited, and despite that, they still spent all this time trying to talk some sense into you.
Oh yeah, they lectured me for hours. Like I'm gonna listen to those losers. I'll find out which companies their parents run and crush them.
Don't say things like that, even as a joke. You work for the city, you can't afford to be reckless.
It's not a joke, I've got access to all their private information. I'll make sure their whole families suffer.
He was about to throw up, so I quickly handed him a glass of cold water, then dragged him to the couch. Once he was passed out and snoring, I turned off the voice recorder on my phone. I had expected him to say some terrible things, so I had recorded the whole thing. Over the next few days, Derek's mood only worsened. He couldn't stop stewing over how his classmates whom he looked down on had bested him both physically and verbally. Meanwhile, I gathered a growing collection of audio recordings of his outbursts. As I reviewed them, I also received the first report from the investigator. Rachel had already reported Derek to the police for stalking, and they had increased patrols in her neighborhood. Derek had already been questioned twice and has strongly resisted when asked to come in for further questioning. The police had a record of it. In other words, Derek was already on their radar. What I still didn't understand was why Derek was so obsessed with Rachel. She was the same age as him, 44, and it wasn't like he was chasing after a younger woman. He had humiliated her, calling her a failure. So why was he stalking her now? While I tried to make sense of it, the new house was almost ready. My favorite part was planning how to decorate and create a peaceful space for myself. When the house was finished, we went to see it for the first time. Derek, who hadn't paid for any of it, was the most excited, talking about how he wanted a bar and a room for hosting poker tournaments. I didn't bother asking him how he planned to play poker alone.
Why do you have so much stuff? We're just going to take a look at the house today.
I just need to check a few things, you'll see later. The heavy bag on my shoulder was filled with documents, all related to Derek. As he fantasized about our new life in the house, my gaze toward him was colder than ever. It's a beautiful house, the product of my hard work. I've come so far that I can afford to buy such a property, and that gives me the confidence to move forward. As I was quietly savoring the moment, Derek, unaware of the mood, looked at me and said,
Choose, care for my parents or divorce. You should be happy I'm giving you the choice.
He said this proudly, standing in front of our brand new home as if he had bought this grand house for me. But the truth is, it was me who purchased the land and the house. Derek was telling me to build a luxurious home with my own money and take care of his parents if I didn't want a divorce. He truly believed that he was entitled to this. We had never discussed taking care of his parents before, and they were in their early 70s and not in need of any real caregiving. Care for your parents, but they don't even live with us.
What are you talking about?
He gave me a pitying look.
My parents would gladly move in if their son's wife promised to take care of them. A big house, living with the in-laws, and having a wife to take care of them. Doesn't that sound like the perfect family setup?
To him, this was all about presenting an image to others. The dutiful son who builds a grand house and takes care of his parents. He didn't really care about his parents. He just wanted the world to think he was a perfect son. The praise he got as a child for being the good son still fed his ego, and he couldn't let go of that need for approval even now, as a grown man. I understand you have an ideal vision, but this house is in my name. It belongs to me.
You're my wife, which means you're under me. What's yours is mine.
What's yours is mine, and what's mine is mine. I'd heard that somewhere before.
You didn't even give me a child, spent all your time chasing after your career, and now you owe my parents at least a house.
The same old rhetoric. I closed my eyes for a moment. No matter what you say, the house is in my name, and besides, as I said before, your parents aren't even planning to live with us. I lightly pushed Derek's back and opened the pristine front door of our new house, leading him inside. There, 2 pairs of shoes were neatly lined up at the entrance. Inside, seated on the bare living room floor, were Derek's parents.
Derek, we never talked about you taking care of us. We don't expect that from you or Sarah. We're planning to sell our house and move into a retirement community. What? What are you talking about? I built this amazing house for you, and you're not even going to live in it? You should be bowing in gratitude and bragging about me to everyone. We've been too lenient with you, Derek. We thought we were being strict, but we were wrong. You've been living your life according to our expectations, but that's not the right way. When you did as we asked, we praised you and gave you whatever you wanted, thinking we were being good parents. We're in our 70s now, and we can't keep up with you anymore, Derek. We need to move on. And by the way, we heard everything you said to Sarah. The way you've been talking down to her is unacceptable.
His parents, once so proud of him, had finally seen through him.
You've always been insecure about living in this town, pretending you're above everyone else, but too scared to leave. You blame us for that and act like your life was limited because of us, but it's your own pride that held you back. Shut up! You don't know what you're talking about. All we wanted was for you to be responsible and work honestly. We didn't care about anything else.
His father's voice echoed through the empty house.
And now we hear you've been getting into trouble with the police. What are you talking about?
Derek, the police contacted your parents because you've been stalking Rachel, one of your classmates. I spread the documents across the floor in front of Derek, including reports from the private investigator. The police have a record of you refusing to cooperate during questioning. You can't hide this anymore.
Why do you even know about Rachel?
I'm from the same town, remember? And Ashley, my childhood friend, told me. I continued to spread the investigator's photos across the floor. Photos of Derek lurking near Rachel's home, hiding behind a telephone pole, watching her. It's no surprise the police are involved. There are kids in that neighborhood. Of course they're going to report a suspicious man like you hanging around. What were you thinking, stalking her like this? Why?
It's your fault, Sarah. You're not even a real woman. You don't support your husband or show any respect. Rachel's different. She's just a part-time worker, a single mother at the bottom of society. No matter what, she'll always be beneath me. So I was doing her a favor by reaching out.
His mother silently stood up and left the room. She looked as if she needed fresh air.
I had no idea you were this low, Derek.
His father slumped down in defeat. That's not even the worst part. Look at this. I held up another photo showing Derek near an all-girls high school. He had been reported by school staff as a suspicious person multiple times. You knew Rachel's daughter was in high school, didn't you? Were you trying to threaten her to get closer to Rachel?
That's not me, it's a fake. Besides, I work at the city office. I wouldn't have time to stalk anyone during school hours.
We know you took the afternoon off that day. The investigator found that out too. And we also know how you accessed Rachel's daughter's school information. You abused your position at the city office to get it.
I didn't do it. You can't prove anything.
Just then, Derek's mother came back inside. Derek, I've already told your parents that you were using your job to look up private information. I took out my phone and played the recording I had saved.
Hey, can you let me know if there's a class reunion gathering happening? I'd love to surprise them. It's just for fun, nothing illegal. I don't feel comfortable with that. You know, personal information is a sensitive issue, and I don't think we can help. Come on, I'm just trying to surprise them. It's not a big deal. You don't want to make me angry. I've got access to all the information I need. I can make things difficult for you. That's a threat. I'm going to have to report this to the police.
I stopped the recording.
Damn it! How dare you record me? I'll report you to the police. Enough! You've been threatening people, abusing your position, and stalking someone. What you've done is criminal.
His father's shout reverberated through the house. I've already informed the city office and the police. The local shopkeepers have also caught on to what you've been doing. Derek's half-crazed shouts were drowned out by his parents' cold stares. So, as for your original question whether I choose to care for your parents or divorce, I choose divorce.
You can't be serious. You're going to show this house to my parents and not let them live in it? You're really going to divorce me?
Of course. And by the way, your parents are moving into a retirement community, so there's no need for this house.
You can't do this. I'm entitled to half of it, everything. That's the law.
You really want to beg me for money after everything you've said? Isn't that humiliating?
I'm entitled to half. That's how it works. I don't have any savings, so I'll be taking half of yours.
His desperation was palpable, and his argument was technically correct. Yes, even if one spouse cheats, the other can't refuse to split assets during a divorce. But that's why we have alimony. I've got plenty of evidence of all the pain and suffering you've caused me over the years. Plus, once the truth about you stealing personal information comes out, you'll lose your job. I wonder if you'll even be able to find part-time work in this town. You're already a known threat.
Derek, stop this. You've caused enough harm. Sarah's worked hard for her money, and you have no right to it.
His father's stern voice cut through Derek's rants.
You're 44 and have nothing to show for it. Not even a savings account.
I had banked on Derek's enormous pride of preventing him from fighting me for money. It worked. He choked on his words and slept in defeat. In the end, the house became my fortress, and I invited my mother to live with me giving her a new life after the death of my father. Meanwhile, Derek's parents began touring retirement communities, finally enjoying time together. As for Derek, I heard through Ashley that his stalking of Rachel's daughter had escalated, leading Rachel to finally take action. Rachel might be a quiet woman, but when it came to protecting her daughter, she was fierce. She had alerted the PTA, reported him to the police, and even started accompanying her daughter to and from school to keep her safe. As for the illegal access to personal information, the city office tried to cover it up at first, but with so many people involved, word spread quickly. The city realized it would be better to cut ties with Derek sooner rather than later. He was ultimately dismissed, and a small note about his dismissal appeared in the local newspaper's crime section. After that, Derek couldn't find any work in town, even part-time jobs. He ended up helping out at his parents' home, living off them while his pride slowly dissolved. His parents, once so proud of him, had long since given up on him. I've got about 10 more years of working at this level, and I plan to live comfortably while caring for my mother. I've realized that I'm someone who can live just fine on my own. It took me until I turned 45 to realize that, but it's not a bad discovery. My mother gets lonely when she has too much free time, so I'm thinking of adopting a rescue cat to keep her company. Maybe it'll be like having a grandchild around.